What's up guys, I'm Kenny with RK3 Designs. Today we're going to show you how we're going to take some pieces of MDF and make some beautiful countertops. What we're going to do first is we're going to rough cut all the tops to make them close to what they need to be. Then we're going to cut some drop edge material, then glue and nail those together, and then we're going to Bondo and paint, and then we'll get on to the epoxy. So as you can see here, we're cutting all the drop edge. We already know how much we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut them all real quick, and then that'll be ready for our next step. Glue and nail them to the tops. Yeah, so this job that we're doing today is one of Rhonda's old friends. She's probably known Rhonda for probably 15, 20 years, I would guess. They used to run around and run barrels together. And so they started remodeling their house, and now we got the opportunity to build them some cool countertops for their freshly remodeled kitchen. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. I've already templated the kitchen, right? I have all my templates. There's 5 tops that we're going to be building, and I've written all my little notes on there. We're going to add 1.5 inches to the front, add 1.5 inches to the side. On this side we have a very crooked wall that we're going to template, and so we're going to trace that out and cut that very crooked, because a lot of the times when y'all are building these things, you're gonna have to cut the tops very crooked so they fit into the space that they need to be fit. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna tape this down so when I trace out the backs and the sides, it won't move, and then I'll have a good accurate cut. So the reason why we add 1.5 inches to the front of your countertops is so if anything spills on your tops, you don't want them to go down into the drawers. You want that little overhang. Then on the sides, we're just adding 1.5 inches for the reveal, so it has a nice reveal. This goes out into the living room. We don't want to keep it flush to the cabinet. And also when y'all are cutting your tops out that are different, what I always try to do is I try to figure out what's the best piece that I'm gonna be able to keep, because I can cut it 2 ways on this way, right? I can have this little piece right here, or I can make this long piece, cut the back first, and then have all this for something else that I might need later. So we'll make this the real small drop. We'll cut a straight line right across the backside, and then we can just use this for some other. So what we're gonna use is our handy dandy track saw. I do like my track saw. If that's one thing that I have to say was money well spent, was the track saw is something that I don't think I could do without. Can you do without it at the beginning? Why, sure you can. But once you get to this place, it's very hard to go back. All right, now that I got that cut, I'm gonna get my template, check it to my piece. And you can see here that is perfect. Everything matches up with the crooked edge. All the back edge is nice and tight. I got my 1.5 inch overhang, and I got my 1.5 inch on the front also. All right, so here's the I guess the island that the sink is gonna be in. In this scenario, we're gonna have a farmer sink. What I recommend is you mocking up the farmer sink and make sure that everything is templated to the actual sink, because we had measurements before we put the sink in, and then I saw it was a farm sink, and then when we went back to retemplate it, it was way off. So fun fact is, put the sink in, make sure that they have the proper bracing for the sink. But for this scenario, what I did is when we came back and we put the template, I put the inside of my template of these lines right here. That is gonna be what I'm gonna be cutting out. And then I'm gonna set the template from the sink, so I have my radius, the proper radius for each one. We'll trace that out, and I think we're gonna be golden. Other than that, it's just a pretty straightforward top. I'm gonna give it 1.5 inches all the way around and cut it out. So we should be good on that. So a farmhouse sink, you're gonna be cutting pretty much a U out of your top, versus an undermount sink, you're gonna cut a hole, then you're gonna pour your epoxy over into that. So that way you don't get confused. Because a lot of the times the farm sink has a lip that comes out and over, and then it's gonna cover the sides of your top. So the last thing you wanna do is cut the hole and then you're having to redo it. Are you able to redo it? Yes, I have done it and added on to your countertop, but it's a lot of steps. You have to be very precise, and then you have to re-pour the whole countertop. So where you're into the problems of matching the design, right? So that's where it gets tricky. So y'all just pay attention to that, and hopefully that doesn't happen to you. So this is Tide Bond 2 glue, and all we're just gonna do is put it down here. I drew a little line there for myself so I don't put more than what I need to. And then I'm just gonna use my little glue roller and then just level it all out. That way it doesn't squish out when I put the other piece on there. And what I found when I've used the glue roller, it gives you a lot better connection to the pieces where you're getting all the glue nice and level, and it leaves like a texture, if you could see that. So then when you put it down, it puts it down really nice. And I'm gonna leave it a little long, so then I'm gonna come back with my flush trim bit and trim it off, and it'll be exact to what it is on the bottom. So when you are doing your drop edge, you should always glue and nail it. Clamps are not necessary for this application because the nail is gonna hold it. Now if you have where you can't nail it, then you might wanna have to use a clamp, but for the most part, you can nail it, and it ain't going anywhere after that. So the key of putting on these drop edge is just leave it about 1/8 to 3/16 off the edge. So when you take your round over bit, it's not really fighting all that material. You want to take off just a little bit as possible, and that'll be the best for that. It's one down. One down, 4 more to go. And these are the little ones. But I would say I give myself a week to build them. You know, if I was doing this all the time, you know, I could probably build them in 2 days. 2 days, and then paint them. Then the next day, pour them, top coat. No, then then the flood coat, then the UTC. I think a good safe bet to let yourself do it is a week and a half. That way you're not rushing. Why? What I'm not understanding is, why do we want to hurry up and rush it and make a mistake when you can take your time, do it right, focus on what you're doing, do it right the first time? It just always, for me, it always seems like the more I rush, the more I make mistakes. You know, I don't know if everybody else is the same way, but for me, that's usually the mess up. So we're gonna use a bottom bearing bit, and you can see the bottom's gonna be, it's gonna be at the bottom, so you can see that. And what it's gonna do is it's gonna run on the bottom sheet that we have, and it's gonna make everything the same as that. So that's why I leave it a little long. I don't have to worry about trying to get these boards just right. Leave them a little proud, and then I'll just cut them off, and it's much faster that way. The bad thing about this bit is dust collection is pretty much out the window because the bit is at the bottom of the shroud, so it doesn't collect anything. So we're gonna fixing to get dirty here, so here we go. Yeah, that's the easiest part. See, that's why I like putting that block right there. That way it gives me a nice big chunk of wood where I'm not gonna have a bunch of mess up. All right, so this one's done with the routering. We're gonna do 2 more small ones, rinse and repeat, same thing. We'll get those knocked out. Then we got the 2 big ones that we're gonna have to put seams on them, and then I'll show you how to do that after we're done with the next 2 small ones. All right, deuces. All right, guys, so now it's time to Bondo. So what we're gonna use today is we're gonna use this 3M Bondo. I found this at my auto body store locally. You can use pretty much any Bondo, but one thing that I will tell you that I recommend that you use is a hardener cream that has color to it. Don't use the cream that is tan, because then you're really not gonna know how much hardener you're putting into there, and then it can cause some issues down the road. either you make it too hot or you don't make it hot enough, it won't set up, and then you'll have to scrape it off and redo it again. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna Bondo on this piece. We're gonna Bondo this left edge and the front. Now, you don't have to Bondo the edges that are up against a cabinet or against the back of the wall. You don't have to do that, so I recommend not to. So what you want to do is make sure that the surface is smooth and clear of dust. I've already blew it off. And the other thing is that you don't have any debris or anything to get in your way. So just make sure that it's clean, it's ready to go, and then we'll mix up some Bondo and get after it. So one thing I like about this Bondo is that, as you can see here, it's very creamy, and we're not going to have to add anything to it to make it creamier like the other Bondo, that high fill that we used to use. That's hard to find, but this is a real creamy Bondo and it works really nice. Now, one thing, if you haven't worked with Bondo before, it does have a big odor. So if you have a sensitive nose to chemicals and stuff like that, I do recommend that you wear a mask. One other thing that I use is metal Bondo spreaders. I like those because, as you can see here, I just cleaned them off. They work really good and I don't have to throw them away. Plus, with those plastic Bondo spreaders, they kind of get chewed up and stuff, and then they leave real bad edges. So I just like these, and you can find these online. So one other thing is you want to make sure that you knead or you mix up the hardener and get that stirred up, because you don't want the hardener to come out like wet ketchup. You know, when you first, if you haven't used it in a while and then you dump it out and all that water comes out, that's what you don't want. You want it to look like toothpaste when you blob that out. And one way you could check after you mix it, if you push it up and it comes out like toothpaste, that looks beautiful. So we'll leave that there. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is when you're doing Bondo, you don't want to stir it. You just need to knead it just like this, okay? So you want to scoop it up, flip it over, and then just pull it back to you. Because what that's going to do is take the bubbles out of the Bondo and not make you sand more down the road. Because if you stir it, you're going to entrain bubbles, and then on your finished piece, then you're going to have to go back over it and put more Bondo to cover the pinholes. So just remember, knead it, not stir it, okay? So what I'll do is I'll get it in a nice little pile so I can kind of see how much Bondo I have. And what they recommend is you do half of the blob, and that's a good rule of thumb, that you just go here and you just put a blob like that. That's a little hot. You can see I put a little bit too much, but it's kind of cool in here, so that'll probably help us out a little bit more. So I'm gonna just start mixing it, and you'll know when you're done when it's a nice even. It's a nice even color and you don't see streaks. Then you'll know that that's pretty good. And so now we are on a clock. This is kind of like quick coat. You want to make sure that you get it mixed and get it on your piece so you don't have any issues. And that looks pretty good to me. I don't see any streaks. Now, we're going to put a little bit of Bondo on my trowel, and what I like to do is I like to push this down and into the seam. The main thing is that we want to make sure that that seam is covered up, and that's the main part of this. So you want to put quite a bit, but not too much, right? And then what we can do is come back over the top and push that down into that seam. And just push it in there and make sure that it's covered up. So a little bit at a time, come back, take that top edge over. That looks pretty good. I got a little bit of something right there, so we'll cover that up. We'll cover that, and that looks really good. So we'll just keep on rolling. And I'm just gonna push it down in there and make sure that we got enough product. So one thing you'll see is once it starts getting like oatmeal and you can kind of see the texture in that, you want to stop. So yeah, so once you start seeing it, that's starting to kick off. So we're gonna stop there. Luckily, I already went down all the way to the end where I needed to, and I had some left over, which is not a big deal. I'd rather have a little left over than not enough. But you could see here, it's already starting to set up, and that'll be good for the, we'll just stop there and we'll be ready to do the next one. Okay, one thing I do like about these clean sheets is right after we're done, we'll be able to rip this off and I don't have to clean anything, and it'll be clean for the next one. Now we could just move this piece out of the way, get the next one on, and we're ready to go. All we'll have to do is just clean our Bondo spreader, and that's real easy to do. After I just rough cut this, I'm gonna have to come back on the back side and just feather it out with the sander. Then we'll get that nice and pretty, we'll get it flat, we'll round over the edges, and then we're gonna Bondo. So that's what we're gonna do for this little piece right here. All right, so the Bondo has dried, it's hard, it's ready to be sanded. I'm gonna go ahead and use the 80 grit to knock it down real fast. You could use 80, 120. Those are the two I like to use on this, but because we have a lot, I just want to knock it down real fast, and we're going to use 80 grit. See how that works out. If I don't like it, I'll go back to 120, but we're going to give it a try. All right, so I went back to the 120. That 80 is a little too aggressive. I think we'll go 80 with the top. That way I don't have to really worry about it, but this, you want to feather it a lot easier with the 120. It's not going to be as aggressive, so. All right, so the best way that I found is to do the top part is to cross hatch the seam. So we're gonna go this way, and then we're gonna come back and then do an X, really. So you're gonna go one way, and then you're gonna come back the other way. And then that way you're gonna have a smoother finish versus if you just went this way, you might get ripples like that. And then you're just gonna feather it out to where it's smooth, and you're not gonna see, you don't see the seam, okay? All right, so I went back and forth with that 80 grit, and as you can, well, you can't see, but when you do this, if you can close your eyes and feel, and see if you can feel a hump, then if you feel it, then you just need to take off a little bit more. But if you can't feel anything, that's good to go. If you wanna get anal about it, put a level on it, and you could see if that's good for you. But if you can't feel it, you're good to go. All right, guys, so when you come across that you have some pinholes or some minor imperfections that you need to take care of, now this is not real big gaps. If you have some big gouges and stuff from the Bondo and you can't get them out, you're gonna have to use Bondo again. But if you have small cracks and some little pinholes that are gonna be prominent, then you can use this stuff. And all it is what I like about it is that you don't have to mix it. All you do is you open it up, and then you just get a little bit on your finger or on a trowel, on a putty knife, and then all you do is I don't have a pinhole here, but all you do is just fill that hole, and it'll dry really fast. And then once that's done, then you just lightly sand and you're good to go. So I think it takes about 15 minutes or so to dry, but that'll save you a lot of time than having to mix another bat, a little bit of Bondo. That's a pain. So glaze putty, it might help you out when you're in a pinch. So for the rest of the tops, it's pretty much rinse and repeat. We're gonna router our top and bottom and then apply the Bondo. We'll let that harden up for about 20 minutes, and then we're gonna use a 120 to smooth the edges and the surface. After the edges are perfectly rounded over, then it's good for the next step. All right, we're gonna use a 80 grit on my sander, and the reason why we're not using a metal fiber disc is my grinder died on me, so we're just gonna have to do with what we got right now. And it's a good opportunity to show that you can do it with your sander and be able to take off the seam. I have a full tutorial on how to seam MDF together, so make sure to check out that video and get down the step-by-step process. We'll leave that in the description below. So what I did is I used dowels and quick coat to seam the two pieces together. I made sure to leave excess amount of quick coat on there, so after it dries I have plenty of product to sand down to the finished surface. This island has an overhang on one of the sides, so we're gonna double it up to make it twice as strong. That way we don't have any issues down the road. So what we're gonna do do is very simple. It's just like putting a drop edge on the other countertops. But instead of using nails, we're gonna use screws. We're gonna glue and screw it together. Just make sure that you're using screws that are shorter than your piece. For this instance, we're using 3/4 MDF and we're gonna double it up, so that makes it 1.5 inches. So we're gonna use 1.25 inch screws to get the job done right. That way they don't go all the way through and pop a hole on the other side. After that, we'll Bondo, and we're gonna get these tops routed, sanded, and painted, and ready for epoxy. All right, the Bondo's done, thank God. It's over. It's been a long day. We're gonna let this dry. We're gonna sand, and then we'll be ready to paint. So we're gonna use Stone Coat's epoxy undercoat because it dries very fast. Just 2 thin coats is all you need. The color scheme that Rhonda chose for this finish is gonna be dark. So that's why we went with black. Okay, that's about it, guys. This is how I make my countertops out of MDF every time. Once you get the steps down, it's fairly simple. Just make sure, like I said earlier, to take your time and do it right the first time. The last thing you wanna do is to show up to a job and try to install your piece with the wrong size. Take it from me, from experience. So let me know, guys, if you have any questions or you have some different things that you can help me out with on building my countertops, let me know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for notifications. That way you can see part 2 and see the final results of this kitchen. Once again, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Adios.